What is going on, wrestling fans? Welcome to the Tapped In Indie Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Heath Mulligan, joined by the man responsible for those new fantastic opening graphics, Nick McDaniel. Nick, how are you today?
I'm good, man. Like you said, it took me a little while. I was the running joke was like, no. I think we're gonna be okay. Like we're not going away, guys. It took me a while to get back into the routine of actually, producing a new one. So I got that up and running over the weekend, and hey, we're back officially. Like so, it looks all cool, and so we're good to go now.
Looks great, and we're 1 week into kind of the format change. Fans, if you want to get all of the shows and all of the content, if you want to get it early, if you want to get all the behind the scenes stuff, you need to go to patreon.com/tapped-out-pod and join today. You can become a member. You can also become a member on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. You hit that like button and also hit the bell so you get all of the notifications. But there's plenty of ways to get the Tapped Out Podcast Network. And so we appreciate your support. You can always just go to tappedoutpod.com. Takes you right to the YouTube page. So new intro, but I want to congratulate you as this is the official 8-year anniversary of the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. That's a pretty awesome thing. So congratulations. And I know there's some other changes that might be coming too.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. So it's today as we record the 26th on Monday. So again, if you're a Patreon member, you're here today, and so forth and so on. Should we call it a sad day too? I'm not really sure how to put it. I mean, we're going to make the announcement, but so we're going to see how people are going to take this. Look, we've teased this I've teased this for a couple months maybe at this point. Last week's episode, we majorly teased it. Let's just put it to you that way. I couldn't have probably been any more, without saying it outright. So the announcement today is the audio podcast version of the podcast kind of is going away. And what I mean by that is so it's going to stop distributing out to every podcast platform on the planet. It took a long time for me, and I'm probably guessing you and for Myron to accept the fact that I said, listen, nobody digs through the data more than me. We are YouTube content creators at this point.
Right.
That's kind of what we do. We are a podcast, yes. But so it doesn't mean it's going away. And I guess because I once I saw all the tools that you have at your disposal as far as podcast goes, I'm kind of like, guys, I'm going to attempt to make this as easy as a transition as I possibly can. I really am. Got to take a water break for a second because
No, sir.
No, you're good. And I did that for a reason because I needed to pause to make sure everybody soaked that in.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube music app. Our podcast directly feeds to that. Literally go in there to podcast, subscribe to us, boom, on your YouTube channel, we're there. So you can subscribe inside there. If you can go to the Patreon page, patreon.com/tappedoutpod. You can sign up as a free member. You don't have to pay. Hey, we appreciate it if you do.
Yes.
There's a dollar level that's just like, hey, I pay $1 a month just to help, support the show.
Right.
Then there's the $5, $10, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, you can do the same thing on YouTube. You can become a paid member on there too. But if you're a free member, you can literally generate an RSS link. And if you do it, you can actually tell it to open an Apple podcast and it will subscribe to you. So it will still go from our Patreon page to Apple Podcast using that RSS feed. And when we put new shows up on the audio on the Patreon, they'll go to your Apple Podcast. So that all being said, yeah, guess what I'm actually going to do? We discussed this and you thought it was a good idea. So I thought, hey, probably make it easier. I'm going to try to make a video showing you how to do that. So if you're an audio listener, look, I feel bad. I know a lot of our friends do listen to it on Spotify and all those other platforms. But look, it just is what it is. We are YouTube creators at this point. It's a video world at this point for the most part. So we hope everybody, and look, email us or whatever. We'll try to walk you through this process to make it simple for you, but the change just was inevitable at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is really easy to go into Patreon. And like you said, you can get the feed there. You can put it into any app you listen to. You can put it into any of those audio apps and still get the content. It's going to take you about 5 minutes to do that. And
one time.
Yeah. And that's all you got to do. I actually, with the Double Dropkick show, when we had our Patreon, I had a Patreon feed going into my Apple podcast so I could make sure everything was going there like it should. But we're just, appreciate all the support. 8 years. Happy birthday to the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Good stuff. I'm sure you and Myron will reminisce a little bit more on this week's show. Let's jump right into the Indy Rewind, which is covering.
Wait. Hold on. What? Stop. I want to change it. I'm gonna blow up your format for you.
Okay.
So we had talked in the past, we were gonna do some national stuff. We were gonna do some all over. So my thing was, I know you got All In. I watched All In. I'm pretty sure Myron had passed up to this point. As we're recording, he probably will watch it. So I wanted us to go through and dive in a little bit to All In, so we could just dig into it and see what we both thought, because we're both AEW guys.
Well, I was considering it. Maybe it's the National Rewind instead of the Indy Rewind is what I should have called it. Mark and I, we watched this last night because for some reason I thought it was coming on last night. He had to work, so he came over after work. We loved the show. We popped. There was really only one match that we just didn't really enjoy. We have just really thoroughly enjoyed AEW since it started. I know it's not for everybody, but for us, like we really enjoy it. And I would love your take on this. The show last night, the setup, it really felt like a Wrestle Kingdom show, especially with the pre-show matches that had about 30 people in each match.
They did the WrestleMania treatment of, hey, let's get everybody on the show. I mean, there was like a 16-man tag match.
Right.
But I will say this. I don't make sure this wasn't in my notes out of order. I can be critical of AEW's television all day long. I think that storytelling, in a sense, that is their weakness. I have always, and probably will always say, it seems like, and I want your opinion on this, they almost always deliver on pay-per-view.
Yeah. And I'll push back a little bit because I'm not able to watch weekly. And so as we're going through some of these matches, Mark is telling me, oh, yeah, they did this and this connected to this. And he was telling me, he was filling me in on the storytelling and connecting dots. I'm like, oh, my goodness, I didn't even see that. Didn't even think about that. And there was a certain, I can't remember which match, but there was this small spot. And he said, oh, that was a callback to such and such. And it's just their weekly TV. Now, the one thing we do like about their weekly TV is it's not the same thing every week. Like WWE, when it was at the peak of the Attitude Era, Steve Austin would be in about 6 segments. I mean, even now, Smackdown is basically the Bloodline, multiple segments. But AEW, it's really spread out. You might have the Acclaimed wrestle one week. It may be a couple of weeks before they wrestle on there again. They may cut a promo or whatever. So I like that anyway, it's just different. They need to be an alternative to WWE. They don't need to be WWE Elite. But again, I bought the 2-pack, so I'll watch All Out here in a couple of weeks and excited to watch that. Let's just go through. So the first match we saw, I didn't really see the pre-show. We saw the trios ladder match. I thought that was a pretty good. I mean, it is what it is. I thought it was a pretty entertaining match.
Yeah, no, I mean they did a good job. I mean, and I was so I'll ask you your opinion now that the stories are kind of out there that originally it was supposed to be Pac and the Lucha Brothers, the Death Triangle, were supposed to be your winners and your trios champions, but with all of the basically the, it's out there, they're gone.
Right.
They're heading WWE bound, but unless somebody gets their contract extended, which could actually happen. Does
Right.
Let me ask you a question: if he does extend that contract due to injury, does Tony Khan come off looking like a bad guy, or does he look like, hey, that's business? That's what everybody does. Or does it look hypocritical because that was one of the criticizing things of WWE?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think he's not doing anything illegal. So he's not, it's going to be, I had not heard all that. I heard a little bit, but then I saw somewhere that maybe it was one of those fake fan accounts, but I saw where, oh my goodness, why can't I think of not Phoenix, the other one. What in the world? I'm struggling. Penta posted that he was staying in AEW. So I'm a little bit confused. Now, It does make sense now, spoiler alert, that the Blackpool Combat Club won, because then you had the in-ring celebration at the end of the night, which made sense. Here's a question. Where was John Moxley in all this? Is he hurt? I'm kind of out of the loop.
No, I mean, I have no idea why he's not out there. I mean, maybe he's just taking time off. I mean, his wife's there.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a lot going on in AEW. They gotta get their behind the scenes stuff cleaned up. Mariah May and Toni Storm was a heck of a match. There was no point in that match where I was like, this is a fake sport. I mean, it was one of the most believable women's matches I've ever watched.
Look, I liked it, but I probably didn't like it as much as you from a wrestling standpoint. But this is the exact moment where I ask you, a la WrestleMania Rock Hogan, the crowd tremendously helped that match. But there are lots of matches. By the way, there are lots of matches we're going to talk about where I feel like the crowd dramatically helped, and one in particular that it hurt.
Right.
I'll get there when we get to that match.
Yeah, I thought the crowd was definitely into that one. One spot that we popped for was in the next match, and that was when Taz got up from the announce table.
Yeah.
And put Brian Keith in the Taz mission. We jumped off the couch for that. Yeah. That's something that's been building for years to get Taz involved in that way. Just, some people like that feud. Some people didn't. It gave Hook an experienced veteran to work with, which is only going to make him better in the long run.
So,
Chris Jericho. Yep.
So you mean a veteran worked with a young guy to help get him over, and at the end of the feud, put him over, and gave him a bunch of experience in ring. Shocking.
Right. And Chris Jericho in that reinvented himself yet once again.
The Madonna of wrestling, right? That it just constantly keeps changing the look and the style and the learning tree. And I mean, look, he's openly mocking himself. Yes. And I'm like, how, to not be so, concerned with about how you look in the grand scheme. But I listen. I love Chris Jericho. I know people like to take shots at him physically, what he looks like now. And I'm like, dude, you realize how old he is? And that's not a shot. That's just that I'm complimenting him how great he looks for his age. And he can still go. Go.
Yes, very much so. Young Bucks retained the tag team titles, which really that was a finish that shocked me. I really thought the Acclaimed was going over in that match. It was a good match. It was an entertaining match. It is, what you're getting with the Young Bucks match. They do it better than anybody. And at this point, they you either love them or you hate them, and it's like they're just leaning into being hated more. let's talk about the gauntlet match. Again, one of the most shocking ending. I mean, that Christian Cage won. No one had that on their bingo card. I think the big thing about this match was Nigel McGuinness returning, which was awesome. The debut of Ricochet. And I want to contrast this. Ricochet comes in, and I don't mean this as no disrespect. Ricochet was made for AEW. If Ricochet had been a free agent when AEW started, he would have been one of the four pillars.
Oh, yeah.
I'll contrast that a little bit later on with another match, another wrestler.
Pause button there, because I'm going to ask you this, because I know you well enough to know you were going to say that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come back with this. I agree. I do. 1,000% agree. However, Tony Khan may have more pressure on him to deliver with Ricochet than any star that I think they've signed, because if he leaves and goes to AEW, they use him right, he'll be a guy. What's the measurement? If Ricochet never wins the world title, is it a failure because of all the hype that you try? By the way, this is my take, and it's a hot take. I think it was a horrible. I think they dropped the ball bringing him into that match. I would have used him to be a big surprise, like in a singles, or even like tease him for weeks that he's coming to Dynamite. Something. Just to have him just pop up out of nowhere. Like, we kind of knew, right? But I didn't think it was going to be in that spot.
No. I think if you can have a chance to debut a guy in front of 55,000 people, that's a good move. Here's the thing. Ricochet's not the world title guy.
He's not.
Ricochet is going to AEW to have the kind of matches he could not have in WWE.
Right.
He went there 100, and I think he's getting paid very well. Ricochet's going there to get turned loose and to wrestle like he's back in PWG in that American Legion Hall in Reseda, California. He is there that eventually he and Will Ospreay are going to have that viral match they had. They're going to have that in a building with thousands, by the way, tens of thousands.
Meltzer asked Ospreay about that at the media scrum.
Oh.
And just he referenced the match. He didn't ask him about the future, but he referenced it to Ospreay about the match. So clearly But here's the thing. I think you're right. And I hate to cut you off. I'm going to let you back. But he's there because he's going to get to work with Will Ospreay. Yes. By the way, I don't know that is there a bigger fan than Kyle Fletcher than I am? Like, when I watch him, I'm like, does anybody, I mean, I get it. The problem is he's Will Ospreay's little brother. Not really, but you know what I'm saying? Like, in the world, he's got to do something, and it's probably a feud with Will Ospreay. To get out of that shadow. But that's what Ricochet's there for. That was back to my point. To have matches with Okada, with Will Ospreay, with Kyle Fletcher's, those guys that just go out there and tear the house down. That's what he's there for. He's the ooh-ah man on the card now. Yeah,
and he Ricochet is so talented, and this is his people. These are his friends. He's performing now in front of fans that they want. Hey, Ricochet, we want you to take the shackles off and just do everything. Jeff Jarrett, also a surprise, and Jeff Jarrett may have gotten the biggest pop in the whole match.
It was insane. I mean, the reaction they gave him was God bless him, and then the guitar shot to Hangman, I was like, absolutely delivered. Look, there was talks on they did a Conrad and Eric did a live feed right after it was over, and there was conversation of, is Jeff Jarrett the next guy to wrestle Bryan Danielson? And they're like, well, if you're going to take the belt off him, are you telling? Conrad goes, Eric, are you suggesting they put the world title on Jeff Jarrett? And Eric said, well, I'm not saying that, but if that's what we got to do, then so be it.
Wow. Wow. That's Jeff Jarrett is just an ageless wonder, and it's good to see him kind of getting his flowers now,
Yeah.
um, in his career. Okada was in this match. Here's the thing: there's so much talent in AEW, and I really think, and I might be wrong about this. I think most of the folks in AEW are getting paid well, and I think they're there. I think they're there to kind of have matches. I don't know. Do we?
Okada's been wasted. I will be the guy that says it, and I say that because who's he wrestled?
Right,
The logic was, yeah, he's going to come over there and he's going to get to wrestle Kenny Omega. Well, now that's not their fault. Kenny's hurt.
right, right,
Okay, well, what about Ospreay? We hadn't seen that. Okay, what about we had there's guy after guy after guy. He's not. He's the third best guy in his group behind the Bucks right now.
right. I definitely feel like. Yeah, I definitely feel like there's. I mean, I thought this was Ricochet. I mean, there was
This is
somebody
okay.
later.
This is why I said there's the danger with Ricochet.
Yeah,
2 years ago, not you, but wrestling fan insert themselves into this role. You told me Okada was the absolute best wrestler on the planet.
right,
He's not even the best guy in his group right now. And by the way, that is a sentiment shared by Conrad Thompson, who's one of the biggest AEW fans they are.
right, right.
You got to kick the gas in now that like you got like Ricochet and you've got a Will Ospreay in there. If you don't, Okada could set the table for what could happen with a Ricochet. Now, here's my advantage: Ricochet's not going to be put into a group, hopefully.
Right.
So he'll get to stand out. Okada's literally the third wheel in the Young Bucks, tricycle.
It'll be very interesting who Ricochet's first feud is with. I think that's the thing is when in New Japan, Okada was he was the champion. He was defending the title. Other than, I mean, he had a fantastic rivalry with Tanahashi. He had a rivalry with AJ Styles, but they've got to develop those rivalries in AEW, and it's just something that's gonna take, it's gonna take some time. MJF, Will Ospreay, really, man, really just enjoyed this match. Ospreay, I mean, maybe the most athletic guy in wrestling. He does things physically, athletically that I've never seen anybody do before. And MJF, you literally can put him in there with anyone, and he can hang with them.
Yeah, and while doing it, ladies and gentlemen of wrestling, like people that want to be a wrestler, there's other guys that can do it for sure, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I say, watch how MJF just embraces the heel role.
Yes.
The little things he does to the crowd and, trying to make them hate him. Look, I get there's a cool concept of cheering the heels or whatever. He does everything in his power to make you not like him. But then at the same time, he did stuff in that match I didn't know that he had in him.
Right. Right.
And yes, I will concur with Will Ospreay. Probably, this is maybe surprising to some. Take MJF out of the equation because I'm not supposed to like him. Will Ospreay's probably my favorite wrestler in AEW.
Yeah, I mean, I love Will Ospreay. I mean, I was very excited to get to see him at Dynamite a few weeks ago. And this feels like following this one. I mean, they got another pay-per-view here in 2 weeks. So it's going to be a quick turnaround to get the matches set for that. But it feels like a lot of stuff got settled last night, and I'm interested to see what they do moving forward. And what's next for MJF? Does he go back into the heavyweight title picture, or does he even need a title?
I don't think he does, by the way.
Right.
He deserves, if he's going to be in a mix for a title, it's the big title.
Yes.
And by the way, not that nobody cares, this hands down was my favorite match of the entire night. Was
Yes.
the
Oh,
NJF. Yeah, it wasn't even close, by the way.
yeah. The next match was my least favorite match of the night. Mercedes Monet
Ditto.
retaining the TBS championship. Um, here, this is the sad. Britt Baker just has not developed in ring wise. The finish to this match was crazy sloppy. I'll compare the finish of this women's match to Toni Storm and Mariah May. The closing sequence of the Mariah May match was impactful. It built. It made sense. The finish of Monet and Baker felt clunky. There was one part where, like, I don't know if Baker was not hooked in how she was. She just kind of threw her down. And I mentioned Ricochet when he came out. The way that he walked, the way that he presented himself was in the AEW style. It fit AEW. Mark had a point. Mercedes Monet, her entrance, the way that she came out, the little dance she does, that is very much
WWE.
WWE.
Okay.
And so I think that's the thing is these are different audiences, it's different presentation, and she has got to figure something out.
Fast.
Because I mean, if they have given her kind of the Hogan deal, that, hey, you can get the big entrances, we're going to give you some creative control. And again, she doesn't understand. Mercedes Monet is really not a darling of the AEW fan base.
No. So you said it, and so it might have been last week's episode that I had with that I recorded with Myron, where I kind of said, if you gave her creative control, if you hired that Jen, and I can't remember her last name, to be her personal writer, if you paid her $5 million a year like the rumors are, this might be the biggest bust free agent signing in a long, long time. Because here's my thing. I wanted to tie all these. I set these pieces, breadcrumbs throughout the early parts.
Mm-hmm.
Remember me talking about how the matches that the crowd made the matches?
Right.
This was the match where I thought the crowd hurt the match, because if you go back and watch this, she's coming down, and that CEO, it's like a loud chant. By the way, I'm not saying it's never been done before. They've done it with Goldberg, et cetera, et cetera. But did you hear it when the music abruptly cut off? Quiet. That meant no fans are chanting, no fans. You're getting zero. And during the match, my wife was next to me, and she remembers Sasha. Mm-hmm. And she looked up and she goes, "Oh, Sasha's there?" And I was like, "No, she's different now." And she goes, "She looks exactly like she's the same character." Yep. It's like you said. If your brand is the alternative, you literally are strolling out the exact same character. No differences, no talking different. And by the way, we've talked in the past about how her skills she might have been a creature of the system. She was a system quarterback. It's pretty rough, because when that finish happened, my wife, not us, not me, you, my wife goes, "Oh, they're really not into her, are they?" That's her saying that. And I'm like, "No, they are not." And we will talk about the differences 2 matches from now. She said, "Oh, no, see, they're really into this one."
Yes. Yeah. Real quick, Jack Perry retained the TNT title over Darby Allin in a coffin match. This surprised me in a couple of ways. First of all, the fact, I love how Jack Perry has embraced the glass. And if I were Tony Khan, I would pay the money. I would have him come out in a Cult of Personality. I would just embrace it all.
But see, I think isn't Punk friends with them, and they probably would never allow that. They would probably not lease it. But anyway, sorry.
No, you're probably 100% right, because Punk does have that relationship with him. but uh, I was surprised that once it got to the end, Perry just dominated that match.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like once it got to the end, like once Darby's hands got taped, it was a squash.
Yeah. And is that
Uh,
surprising? Because Darby Allin has a title shot coming up that he won. He does. I think it's at Grand Slam, I think.
huh?
Or it's All Out or Grand Slam. I can't even remember. Sorry, but I know he's won a title shot or something like that coming up soon. That's why
Very
it surprised me.
interesting.
I'm like, I get it. They don't want to put that belt on him, but I felt like did he give too much to Jack Perry? And I know it was like, oh, they did all this and this and that. Yeah, but it still like felt like Jack Perry took it to him.
Yes. Um. Yeah, and I think that's a good spot for Jack Perry. He's never going to be a champion,
Mm-mm.
but he could be a good TNT champion.
Do you think he needs to give up the scapegoat gimmick though? Because like the CM Punk thing's like you're never going to get an end to it. There's no payoff. There, like just kind of at some point, hey, we need to press on and go a different route.
Here's what I would do. I would have made yesterday the end of that. You did the thing with the glass. Everybody got it. Did you get that out of your system? Move forward. Embrace being a heel. Embrace all of that. But kind of let what you did at All In kind of be the exclamation point. I mean, you won a good match and move forward. I think you're right, man. That can only play out so long. Mark and I, the main event, what a tremendous match. I'm sure Mark and I will talk about this whenever we get the opportunity to record. Mark just asked the question: Is there a better wrestler than Bryan Danielson over the last 25 years? Like in ring, is there a better wrestler? And Mark's like, I've watched a lot of wrestling. I don't think there is someone better than him.
And I don't know if you've heard, but on his podcast on a very regular basis, Jeff Jarrett says, hands down, Bryan Danielson is the absolute best in-ring storyteller in pro wrestling.
Yes. I think we talk about AEW and the matches, but the storytelling in this. Yes, please.
Do I go out of order here?
No, go right ahead.
So here's the thing. We'll come to some of the other things. The fans were all into this match. They're totally invested into it. And that's why we got the reaction we got the emotion that we got. But here's the thing. It's twofold. They were so emotional because of we know Daniel Bryan's retiring. Bryan Danielson, sorry. I'll get it out of my system in some year. He'll be retired and long gone, and I'll change.
Right.
But we're so emotionally invested in it. We're so, we've seen over the years. But here's the killer. Is it equity he built up with you in AEW, or is what he built up in WWE why you're so emotionally invested in him?
Oh, I think it's the history. I think it's definitely the history. I think it's the fact that he was forced to retire once due to injury. Mm-hmm. He came back, and I think a lot of times we forget that run he had as kind of the hippie hemp title, which was great. So this, I did not think he was going to win this match.
No. Here's the funny thing. So on last week's episode, we made some predictions on it. On the other Myron's and I showed, and my comment was, take it for what it is, folks. I'm aware. Daniel Bryan's on a handshake deal, supposedly. His contract is up. He claims he was never going to sign. That was the last deal he was ever going to sign. Mm-hmm. Everything in their right mind would point you to that he was losing this match. It would do wonders for Swerve Strickland to be the last match to beat him, and he retires and he goes off into the sunset. All of the things make perfect sense. That's why it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because you know why? Because Tony Khan lets guys retire as champion. He let Sting retire as the tag team champion, and then, hey, we'll do a tournament for it. Sting never lost a match at AEW, blah, 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 on and on and on. there are times, and I'm not, look, I would tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Tell me if I'm wrong here. My statement is real simple. And hey, guys, I promise you, we are going to talk about indie stuff in a minute. But Tony Khan sometimes is more worried about doing the right thing for the wrestler more so than his company, I think. And that's what I feel like. Look, I'm not saying Daniel Bryan didn't deserve what do you deserve? Who deserves what, right? In pro wrestling. So if Dan, like, we don't know, and look, we're going to find out a lot. And there's a whole conversation on next episode of the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast. I've already seen one of the questions that came in, and we're going to discuss what's next for Bryan Danielson. So that's just, I mean, I just, I agree with you. I honestly thought Swerve was going to win this, because there is a question now: what's next for Swerve?
Right. I don't know. You had so many things that happened in AEW over the past year. You had the thing with CM Punk. You had the injury to Adam Cole. So many things happened that I don't know that Swerve was in line to have the run that he did, but I do think he made the most of it. He sees the opportunity. I think, going back to something you said, the way that Tony Khan does what's best for the wrestler at the expense of the company sometimes, that might be why people go work for Tony Khan.
Yeah.
For all of his faults, Tony Khan is a mark. He has an appreciation, an outside appreciation for what these men and women do, because he was a fan. And I think he books as a fan one time, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's not so good.
Speaking of not so good, last thing I wanted to ask you, I don't know why it stood out to me. Now that I'm about to say what I'm about to say, I want you to go back and watch the entrance again. There were wrestlers in the past, I hear stories of, like, they get boo-boo face. When they know they're going to lose, you can see it on their face when they come to the ring. You'd have to ask my wife, but when Swerve Strickland started walking to the ring, I looked at her and said, he's going to lose.
Huh.
And she goes, what? And I go, look at his face. You can tell he is not his normal, like, the smile and got that little. No, there was not as much of a little, swagger in his movement and his face. I was like, he's going to lose. And when he did, I was like, I hope he's not. I actually loved the match. I love Swerve Strickland as a talent. But my thing was, I hope this was not this is what made me think it, by the way. Was it how close toward the end did that decision get made that Bryan Danielson was going to win that title? And, it didn't. I'm sure Swerve Strickland understood, but I feel like if you're not a talent who feels like, I still have some in the tank in this run, I still have things to prove, and him beating me probably sets him back, because now let's be honest, he's going to go off and feud with Hangman Page.
Right.
Nothing to do with the title. They're going to go off and feud again, and probably, so. But yeah, go back and watch his entrance, and again, now that you know he lost, and see if you see what I saw live. I actually saw him and wondered. I'm like, is he really? He's going to lose.
That's very interesting. I'll definitely have to go and check that out. Anyway, it was a phenomenal pay-per-view. Loved it. They got another one coming up in 2 weeks. So make sure you check them out. September the 8th is all out. And that's in Chicago. Yeah, because I was supposed to be at it in Chicago next weekend, and they changed all of our travel plans.
No, originally we were supposed to be in Chicago this weekend.
Right, upcoming. Yeah.
This upcoming
weekend.
Yeah.
And then they moved it back. So anyway, it was good stuff. So I'm sure we'll watch that, and we'll talk about that on the next show. So let's get into this week's Indy Rewind. And over the weekend, we saw the clips of JBL showing up at GCW's show and taking out Effie and helping Mance Warner. The question you got here in the show notes is Game Changer still an independent promotion? Is it an indie?
Here's my reasoning in that question. In my tier of pro wrestling promotions, I put them above NWA.
100%. 100%. They're doing pay-per-view type shows that you used to could get on Fight for pretty reasonable, or Triller now.
No, Triller, yeah.
Um, I heard a rumor, and I heard a rumor from a promoter who shall remain unnamed, and we were talking about this. And the rumor I heard was that Game Changer Wrestling had $1 million investor. Somebody that put $1 million into it. And it wasn't long after I heard that rumor that they really were making the push and they were doing multiple pay-per-views. And it's when they really kind of started their expansion. Again, don't know if that's true, but I would say if you got $1 million investment, I don't know that you're an independent promotion anymore.
And just they run constantly. They're always I feel like they don't go more than a couple of weeks and they're running somewhere again. And like, Matt Cardona's now back in action. JBL shows up, like you said. I mean, helps, Mance Warner win. I just think on any given show, man, they're another promotion that, like, there's no idea who's coming. Just none.
Right. What do you think about I mean, I was pretty shocked, JBL. I mean, JBL also showed up in AAA over the weekend with Nick Nemeth. I think Triple H is just letting folks do stuff. I don't think there's this belief that you're tarnishing WWE if you're working for other promotions.
Yeah, somebody asked me that, and they were kind of like, about JBL being there. Like, well, I guess his legacy deal or whatever they call it's up or whatever. And I was like, I doubt it. Triple H is probably like, so we're not paying you to wrestle. Like, we're paying you to keep so we can sell merch for, sell your merch and make money off of it and have you pop up on TV from time to time or whatever. Triple H's going to pay you how much to fly you down there and you can make an appearance? Game Changer's going to pay you how much to make an appearance? Why not? Right? I mean,
yep.
Triple H has always talked about the health of the industry as a whole. He understands Bloodsport needs to be successful. GCW needs to be successful. All these promotions need to be successful so all these people have work and they can get better at these other places. I don't care what kind of budget you have. Let's think if all these bigger other promotions went away. WWE can't hire them all.
Right. That's right. That's right.
So, and here's exponentially what happens. Those people flood down to the indies, and then it's everybody that's at the indies start getting flooded out. So, that's I think he just gets it, and he's just okay with it. Go make your money, man, and it's good for they're gonna talk about your WWE Hall of Famer JBL. That's who's there, right?
Yes. I think it's good for everybody, and it's a good thing. In Franklin, Georgia, Friday night, New Legacy Pro had a show. You had the Standard become the new tag team champions. You had Alexander Lev take on Nick Halen. Barry Morales also making an appearance. And a guy who I think he made his debut there, Stevie Ray Frost, starting to make some noise on the Georgia scene.
Yeah, man. Look, a lot of positive feedback we're starting to hear. I know he's been around for a while, but when guys are starting, there's guys like behind the scenes at shows starting to vouch for him, putting the good word into us, saying, hey, maybe you need to pay attention to Stevie Ray Frost. And I was like, all right, look, if you're going to mention him, I'll keep it, By the way, the Standard, Jaden Vane and AJ, like winning tag gold, that team starting to be seen in a lot of promotions. Bullpen, up in the Northeast, all that. They're starting to be seen, and it's they're starting to hit the miles and get some recognition out of it as well.
Yes, kudos to them. Super young team. SCA also, they were in action Friday night. Make sure they're building up to their anniversary show, their first anniversary show coming up September 6th there in Royston, with Heath Slater making an appearance. Deep South had a tag team tournament 2 nights. Looked like they had a great crowd. We don't have the results to to know who won that, but they had a great crowd. And then you and Myron on Saturday night went out to Southern Violence and Wrestling out in Suwanee at Monkey Wrench Brewing. How'd you guys enjoy yourselves?
Always good little show, man. They did a 9-man scramble. Lots of they had female talent involved. There was a lot of young talents in there. It was really cool to see. I had not seen Dax Anthony in a while. I know he's working down at Coastal, but between Southern Honor, he used to do some stuff there and around. So it's good to see him back. He looks like he's in great shape. Lots of young talent on this card. So, and some stood out specifically, like in the scramble. It's really cool. So Michael Solar was supposed to be on it, I think, but he was not there. Saddening because I know he's, my daughter's friend's favorite wrestler. Christian Taylor, Dennis Glass, they were two young men that stood out for another reason, which, do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to,
Yeah, let's talk about it.
These two young men, they're there, they're paying their dues, getting their work in. But I wanted to tip my cap to them because after the show, them and I believe his name is JD Inc. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I believe that's the name. Those three young men are the only three taking the ring down. So if it feels like this is shots at people, I apologize. But those three young men, boom, jumped in the ring and rapid rate, taking that ring apart, and that's it. Those three guys on this whole show, those three guys jumped in there, boom, 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 start taking it apart. And we just kind of pointed out, like, hey, that clearly shows you that whoever's training these guys or whoever's, working with them, they're teaching them right. Whether that's, I'd heard, look, I know they train QT Marshall, Nightmare Factory. By the way, Christian Taylor, apparently, we were pointed out that Techi Mikuchi had actually trained him for some while.
Oh, wow.
So he's, I know he's working up at SCA. So the vets up there are probably getting in his ear, teaching him right as well. But good to see those two kids, for doing the right thing. I'll give them a round of applause on the air for that one.
So on this card, there were 6 title matches. Mm-hmm. One of them was Terry Lawler defending the GCW heavyweight title, which it seems like he's defending that title various places.
He has. He's. You're froze if you're curious, so that's why I'm talking.
My whole computer is restarting for some reason. I do not know what's happening right now.
So basically, Terry Lawler, yes. So Terry, he's like all over the place between Southern Violence, and he's done obviously GCW. He's done, I think, some shows up north, in the northern side. He's just all over the place. And kudos for GCW allowing him to hit the roads and defend that title all over. And I even heard a little birdie told me yesterday that it's happening again soon. Like he's defending it. I'll go ahead and tell you. I think it's actually, cross our fingers. I hope it's out there. But I think he's going to be defending it at one of the Nerd U shows in Commerce.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
So kudos. Look, if I spoiled that, I apologize, Matt. I didn't mean to.
So yeah, lots. So you had the SVW Legacy title. You had tag titles. You had the hardcore title. You had the Hoss Fight title, and then you had a main event: Rico Gonzalez and Dante Darko. A little bit of controversy there in that ending.
Yeah, multiple ref bumps. Rico thought he won. By the way, this is the bad guy Rico over at Southern Violence. So you got a whole different look to him, and I really enjoy when I see that. By the way, I'll tell you a little conversation that was had. I appreciate the fact that when there's a guy who wrestles babyface in one and heel in the other, when he actually wrestles like the appropriate roles in the two places.
Yes.
We didn't get high flying, Rico. We got, no, I'm a bad guy and I'm going to stomp you, punch you, kick, and I'm like I like to see those differences when you have the two different personalities. I think those things are appropriate, but that's just my take.
So this was Southern Violence and Wrestling's first show there at Monkey Wrench Brewing in Suwanee, Georgia. And it sounded like the venue was pretty happy with the results.
Yeah, they've already announced September 21st. They will be back there. So it's another Saturday night. So, we'll see what the card looks like when it plays out, obviously. But yeah, look, I won't lie. It's really difficult when there are shows that close to home to not choose those shows. I mean, it's hard to say, hey, you can drive 20 minutes or you can drive 3 hours to a show. Like, guys, I always tell people, like, you can't really blame me in some of those scenarios, but I still try to drive those longer ones, but
Well, just as we're seeing more and more shows at breweries, we didn't have this in notes, but do want to mention, it came out last week. Southern Brewing Company there in Athens closed down, and that's where
I want a correction. That is not 100% accurate. So let me pump.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, let's talk about this.
I know everybody's like, oh, they're doom and gloom. There's some restructuring of ownership management to some degree. They should be. I'm not saying they are. So don't. They temporarily had to just we're shutting the doors. We're going to figure all this stuff out, and we'll be back. So gotcha. That's. I want to clarify that. No, the plan is they are going to reopen, and so temporarily the Monday Nightmare shows we were supposed to be there tonight.
Right.
That show's going to move over. It's going to be, I believe it's September. What did I tell you? The 9th, 2nd,
I think
2nd.
So.
They're going to move over to it's South Main Brewing. It's at Athens, Watkinsville. And look, when things were, if things get reopened or whatever, they'll move back and everything will be fine. Because I just know that I'd heard hey, they've closed down, they're out of business. I was like, okay, whoa, time out. That's not exactly the truth. Not saying you're wrong. They could they never reopen? Hypothetically, I guess that's the case, but that's not right. That's not the plan, folks. That's not the plan.
Well, the more places to have wrestling is always a good thing. Then Sunday, we'll talk a little bit about some Carolinas wrestling. I did not make the 3-count show Saturday night. Looked like they had another good crowd there in Greenville, South Carolina. But AML was in Salisbury, North Carolina on Sunday. Such names as Nick Nemeth, Bully Ray, Jerry Lawler, the Andersons. AML, if you go back, and I actually messaged them, when they posted their January poster, it said the final season. I messaged messaged Tracy or messaged AML. It's like, hey, I noticed this. What's the deal? And it said they were going to make an announcement. And I think I was actually at that show. And they didn't make an announcement. And I haven't seen any mention since. So I don't know if they were planning on this being the last year, but they've been trucking right along, having great crowds, doing some really cool things. And they get names there in the Carolinas that a lot of others aren't getting. But they're obviously building to WrestleCade weekend. But it was Palmetto Championship Wrestling do a really good crowd in Lexington Saturday night. Again, it was a good weekend all around.
And have you seen the poster for AML's next show?
No,
They posted up, and at their next show, on the front center of the poster is Camille, the Brick House. She is front and center. It looks like Angelina Love is on that show. And then if you scroll right up to the next poster above it.
Oh, I see it now.
Yeah. Look at that. And then if you go above it to the men's, there's then the poster above it is Dominic Dijak, whatever his name was in WWE. The Andersons are on there again. So, I mean, it ain't like they're slowing down. Kudos to Tracy and those guys. They put the pedal to the metal, and they just do. And by the way, if you ever wonder how they do that, go look at the videos and the pictures on their page and look how full that building is. It's crazy how busy, how much they draw.
Pretty good. So we mentioned Georgia, we mentioned Carolinas, and shout out to listener Alan Welchel, who has had a podcast there for a while called Wrestling with God. He's just been a great supporter of the Double Dropkick show and has moved over and listened to this show as well now. He sent in some questions that I'd like to tackle here if we can. And he asked, what are the reasons that Georgia has a thriving scene and South Carolina seems to be struggling? Any thoughts on that?
I'll ask a weird question because you would know more so than me living up in the Carolinas. I have always heard the challenges of having a commission who's super involved with their fingers they're into everything a little more. Is that accurate? Would you describe that? And I only say that because does it reduce the amount of people that are willing to take those chances? And, because there's more like, hey, we know what you're doing here and there to the detail.
So I would say no. Here's the thing. The commission might be a deterrent to getting started. You have to get your permit. You have to get a license. You have to follow some regulations. You got to send in your gate receipt form. You got to pay money.
That's the one I'm talking about the most.
but it's typically not. I mean, you're talking 5%. We're not talking. I mean, now if you've got a gate of $5,000, that's $250. But anyway, not a lot of independent gates of $5,000. As far as the day-to-day operations, the Athletic Commission in South Carolina exists for one reason, or in terms of wrestling, it exists to collect multiple checks from WWE every year. That is simply
and
it.
AEW now, right? So
and AEW now. They're not getting a lot of. They are not following up with the independent, they're just not. They're not policing anything in independent wrestling in South Carolina. At least they haven't been the last couple of years. Even when I've called to ask questions. Anyway, so I think there's a misconception in that. I do think, and I created some maps, and I put a link to a map of Georgia promotions here in the show notes. Georgia definitely has more quantity, 20 plus, maybe close to 30 promotions in Georgia. South Carolina, he's saying, hey, South Carolina in pretty good shape. Right now, I'm counting Palmetto in Lexington, Turbo in Greenville, 3 Count in Greenville, Asylum Pro Wrestling in Bowling Springs, American Wrestling League, Classic Pro Wrestling, which they haven't really run consistently lately. OSCW runs 4 times a year in Hanahan, always draws good crowds. WrestleForce, Bob Keller's promotion in Columbia, they're outside. They've had to postpone their last 3 or 4 shows. I mean, they did have one show, but just the weather. So there's not as many in South Carolina. Now, North Carolina is kind of like Georgia in that tons of shows, but not as many. Here's a question. How strong is Georgia compared to other parts of the U.S., do you think?
That's one that I really think our goal over the next, and look, and I get it, it's probably a 2-year, like a 1 or 2 year goal, is to start figuring that part out. Like look, we know about, the reality of wrestling, Booker T's promotion. I have some friends that work at Rocky Mountain Pro, which is kind of now it's an offshoot of OVW. Obviously OVW, we know of some that are out there, but I really probably would like to dig a little more into like promotions per state and, who's drawing and that kind of stuff. I guess it'd be easier. I'm not being sarcastic. It'd be easier in states where there's a commission who keep up with that kind of stuff to figure that out.
Right.
But the ones that don't, throw your hands up, and honestly, I'd say ask wrestlers, but I guess the wrestlers have to wrestle in more states than just one to answer that question.
Yeah, I would, if I were a betting man, I would put money on Georgia having more promotions than a lot of other states. Yeah. Even big states probably don't have that many promotion. Now, not saying, I mean, there were some promotions that are in South Carolina that I didn't mention because the quality's not there.
So I have always heard the perception, let's, correct me if I'm wrong. I'd love to know I'd love to know from wrestlers who do travel from multiple states, and I honestly, Matt Griffin would probably be a great resource to tap into because he's with his, like relationships with IWTV, they would probably know. But just for me, it always appears on the IWTVs of the world, right? It appears like when I mean Southeast folks, I mean like that. I ain't talking about the entire southeast. It's like the pocket. Then there's like when I say the northeast, I always even hear like New York's not. It's like the New England state. You know, those are good. And then we've heard about, obviously Chicago's got to be, it is what it is. Just because that's such a hot wrestling town. Then Texas, and then like California, like you jump, like there's pockets.
Yeah, you don't hear about the great independent wrestling scene in New Mexico or the Dakotas or Wyoming or Idaho or Nebraska or any of those. So, it's a very good, yeah, it's a very good question. I think that's something definitely to research. I would say I've always heard that from the companies that the Southern guys were a little bit ahead of everybody else. That when the big company was signing a Southern guy, they knew what they were getting, and they knew they could kind of trace their trainer or whatever their experience. I guarantee you, there's not. We talked a couple of weeks ago of the number of shows in Georgia that drew over 500 plus. There was multiple shows that weekend. I bet that's not happening anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, I mean, Border City Wrestling. I was drawing a blank. That's Scott Demore's that runs up in that Detroit, right on the Canada coast, right in that area and stuff. So, sorry, I don't know why that one popped into my head at the last minute, but that's another one that does really well. There's the MCW in Baltimore or whatever. There are some big ones out there. I would just love to really dive. Maybe that's a challenge, Alan. We appreciate it. Maybe we dive down that rabbit hole and do some research to try to find out like who are the big ones all over.
Yeah, I would encourage you, Alan, if you can find Phil Stamper on Facebook. I know if you are on our Patreon, Nick sends out. Phil Stamper does the nationwide list of shows around the country. Yeah. So that's a good thing that's a good thing to follow. But these are good questions, Alan, and we appreciate your support. We also appreciate all of our patrons' support. Patreon.com/tappedoutpod. Again, it's where you get all the shows early. It's where you get all the behind the scenes stuff. If there's a Heath hot takes or various things, and we still got multiple other shows in the works that'll be for our patrons. And also you can join there at YouTube, hit the subscribe, hit the like, hit that bell, and get plugged into what's happening with the Tapped In Indie Wrestling Podcast and the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Nick, any other thoughts before we jump off here?
Yeah, I just want to again say thanks for all the support. You're right, man. 8 years, it's been a long, long ride. And Myron and I obviously will dive into it a little bit. The running joke is we'll talk about it. Myron will cry a little bit. And then, we will kind of, reminisce a little over the, the last 8 years. But I do, again, want to kind of make sure everybody's aware this will be the last two. Look, there may be some changes. I'm not saying it won't come back in some form or fashion. But like I said, you put it out. It's so easy to add this RSS link. Just go to our Patreon, sign up for free. You don't have to pay. Just become a free member. You'll get an RSS link that you can put in your Apple Podcast, etc. Whatever your podcast platform is, and it'll feed right to that. So it's still like it's not going to go away. It's just Patreon essentially is going to be my distributor going forward. So if you didn't notice, the Lipson commercial stopped a couple weeks ago. This was kind of leading that path. If I kind of knew, and we made the decision over the weekend. I talked to you, talked to Meyer, and we kind of went over some stuff, and the decision was kind of made like, hey, this is kind of, so will it be back? Maybe not in the sense of like what you're used to, but if I can get it redirected and it's feeding from either YouTube or whatever, but the YouTube Music app, go to sign up for the Patreon, free membership, get that RSS link, dump it into your thing, and going forward, it'll continue like, it'll be a different feed, but it'll be like nothing's really ever changed. So that's, we're trying to make it easy, and I promise you I'll figure out, I'll do the video to make it, try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. So in those 8 years, I mean, a lot of wrestling podcasts have come and gone, and Tapped Out is still standing. So again, fans, we thank you for your support. Thanks, Alan, for your questions. Tappedoutpod@gmail.com is where you can email us any of your questions, any of your thoughts. Tell us where we were right. Tell us where we were wrong. It does not matter. We just appreciate the support. We appreciate you listening. So for Nick McDaniel, this is Heath Mulligan, and we'll see you at the matches.